Hey everybody. I have I may have started this before I told Megan I was starting. Sorry. You're live. Just FYI. Yeah, he's cute. What are you doing back there, boy? I am Dr. Josh with Digital Hammurabi, and as you can see, this is a Saturday afternoon. I just woke up from a nap and thought, Megan, we owe them a stream. So that's what I'm doing. And we have 6 people watching. In case any of you 6 don't know who we are and what we do, that's Megan back there on her back flipping the baby around, pond next to her, and our youngest Oliver, who has also just woken up from a nap, and
he's eating mommy's knees.
He's eating mommy's knees. Good. So what we try to do here is bring the ancient Near East, and that includes ancient Mesopotamia, things like esoteric, Sumerian, and Akkadian, but also, the Hebrew Bible. I have training, obviously, in the New Testament. I have a master's in theology from Capital Bible Seminary, so I've had an awful lot of Greek, but because I did it more linguistically. Anyway, the point is that we do go into the New Testament, but just not as much. Our focus is mainly BCE. Anyway, but I thought that because yesterday we made a mistake and said that we were going to do a stream, it said that there was going to be a stream yesterday because we meant for it to be today, and we left some people waiting, which I tried to take responsibility for it. Megan was having none of it. And then we were going to go on today, actually right now, and turns out that there was a scheduling conflict and something happened that our guest couldn't come on. And so it was like, well, she can do it tomorrow, which is going to be fantastic, by the way. But it just sort of left this spot open. And I know that we're doing our monetization celebration tonight. But I just thought, you know what? I feel like I feel like I owe him something. So we have 20 people watching right now. What I'd like to do is, I'd show you, this is sort of my little study area. So I have a pile of books down here, and I have a pile of books over there on the shelf. This is sort of where we, in our little space, try to make the magic happen. It sounded weird giving it in a bedroom. Anyway, but I've been studying a bunch of little side projects here of late, and I can talk about some of them. There are a couple of them I can't talk about just because we've got some things in the mix. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to open it up to you guys. And if you want to ask me about ancient Near East stuff, if you want to ask me about Old Testament stuff, if you want to, roll the dice and ask me about New Testament stuff, particularly if it's linguistic in nature, like, hey, what does this Greek phrase mean or this Greek word mean? I can work with you on that. But again, I don't get into the Greek nearly as much as I used to, so it might be a slower process. But have at it. Ask me anything, and I have no excuse now. I was telling Megan this. I've got the chat or whatever open up over here, and I normally have a tough time seeing it, but I have no excuse now because it'll be big and green if because we have the thing that I can't remember what it's called. And actually, I don't think Megan is out there watching right now, so she can't yell back what it is. It's the the thing where you type and it turns green. Okay. So let me see if I can't look at the chat now and see what's going on. Oh, cool. Got Chris here, Mathmagic Panda, Jarpone. Yeah, man, this is awesome. If you guys like the stream, please give it a thumbs up thing. Milwaukee atheists are here. Awesome. Okay. Okay. So, I tell you what I'll do while we're waiting for some questions to come in. I'll talk about some of the stuff I've been working on. Actually, this morning, and this might be a fun thing to talk about if you guys have questions about it. I haven't translated through Isaiah 53 in a little while, and of course, that was a big thing back when I was in seminary. It's obviously a very important passage from a messianic standpoint. Pond back there. By the way, he's named after, I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but he's named after the Doctor Who character. I never remember her first name, but come along, Pond. Come along, Pond. So, right. So this morning, actually last night and this morning, I just sat down and went back through the text. Complicated passage, honestly. But it's interesting translating it on this side of my faith journey. Is that a good way to say that? It's a very different perspective. So Isaiah 53, of course, when you read it from an evangelical standpoint or an evangelical perspective, you translate through it and it's like, oh my gosh, look, it's so clear. It's like reading Psalm 22 or something. It's so clear that this is talking about the Messiah, about Jesus, the Messiah, right? So when you translate it on this side, and you're just, you're taking it in its context and its historical context, and it's a very different feeling. So yeah, if you guys have questions about that, maybe I can talk about that. Again, it's tough for me to see the chat. Okay, Jarapone, I have a question, Dr. Josh. What is your opinion on Black Hebrewism and Christian identity, aka British Israelism? I'm going to be honest. I don't have any idea what that is. Does that make me a terrible person? I don't know. I'm not. I've heard some things about it. Like that was a thing. But I don't know. So maybe if you want to clarify what maybe it is, or yeah. Anyway, maybe I can talk about it or something specific about it. Okay, Francois Bellotti, how much of the Akkadian scribes knew Sumerian, as in at least the Sumerian meanings for the signs they were using on the tablets for their own Akkadian language? Okay, good question. Very complex question. It depends on what you're talking about. So hang on 1 second. I've got a little bit of a cold, so let me just. This is really good for a live stream, I'm sure. But it is what it is. This is one of the wonderful things about having a co-host, because you can, run and do something like that, and she can sit here and look good on the camera. Okay, so Akkadian scribes, scribal education and scribal competency, those sorts of things, complex topic. Sumerian probably died as a living language, probably died at the end of the third millennium. And so when you come into the Old Babylonian period, which is early second millennium, maybe 2000 to 1600 roughly, what you end up having is Sumerian is sort of relegated to some very specific circles. One of those circles is scribal training. So scribal schools that are, we know at least were held in homes. We actually know a lot about scribal training, but being a scribe, it was assumed that you knew Akkadian, and so you would have. Because Akkadian is the lingua franca of the period, right? So in scribal schools, you would have these practice tablets where they would start to practice wedges and learn the different signs. But but the elite scribes really prided themselves on knowing Sumerian, and scribes in general did that. So when you look at, for example, and it's part of my dissertation, when you look at scribal education as it appeared in the city of Nippur, for example, which is a city that's really well known for scribal education, and that's where an awful lot of our tablets come from. That's where House F is during the reign of Samsu-Iluna. A lot of those, the Old Babylonian king, and a lot of those tablets, very few of those tablets, I will say, are in Akkadian. And you can't infer from that in any way that they didn't know Akkadian. It was that, of course, they knew Akkadian. Everybody knows Akkadian, right? They were focusing on writing Sumerian. Whereas when you get into more of the, not peripheral, but, some of the non-centralized, perhaps, or less centralized cities like Kish, where I was working, you have many more Akkadian texts. Down in the city of Ur, you have a lot of Akkadian texts. A lot. You have more Akkadian texts, and it's because they were the curriculum could be modified to fit the context in which it was taught. Curriculum I'm using loosely there. Okay, so sort of that's the backdrop, at least of the Old Babylonian period, and every period is different. What did the scribes know of Sumerian? Probably knew a lot, particularly since they were charged with memorizing the literary texts. That being said, it was really only the scribes, right? I mean, this is all debated, right? There's nothing fixed here. But the point of the question seems to be, and I'll wrap this up. Sorry. Point of the question seems to be that there's a variant. There's a difference, but even though even though both Sumerian and Akkadian use the cuneiform writing system, cuneiform sign values, how cuneiform signs, what they represent, can be fairly different when they're used to write Akkadian and vice versa. If you want some videos on this, we have several of them on our channel, so please go check them out. One of the things that's interesting that would be pertinent perhaps to this is, in my dissertation, I worked with these religious texts, these liturgical texts that were written out phonetically. They were written out as they sounded, and they were written in Sumerian, written in actually a dialect of Sumerian. And what we know is, sorry, I heard my voice, which I thought was strange, but of course she's listening to it out there, which makes more sense now. Anyway, sorry. What was I saying? The phonetic text. So the phonetic text, they're writing out Sumerian liturgical texts, but they're written I was trying to figure out, was there a system? Was there a process? Was there a set of rules that they used when they wrote these texts out phonetically? So,
do you want me to sit here and help with the questions?
Oh, are there a bunch? Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm really not good at this. I haven't seen any big green things.
No, it's okay.
Sorry. I feel like I have somewhat of an excuse. If it's not big and green, how can I see it? I'm just kidding. So Megan's going to help me. Are you mocking my disability?
I am mocking your disability.
It's a running joke in our house. Sorry. Okay. So if I were to ask you, if you've ever graduated, if you've ever walked across the stage and somebody was going to pronounce your name, people have interesting names nowadays, right? Interesting, different. People don't recognize them. And so instead of writing out your name, what they'll ask you to do is write it phonetically, right? So I would write my name maybe JA-SHOE dash W-A-H. I don't know. Joshua.
That's how my mum writes it.
Is it?
Joshua.
Joshua. Okay. Yeah. However, if you were to ask me a week from now, Josh, write your name out phonetically or write out a sentence phonetically, I might write it differently. I might write like J-A-A or just J-A or J-A-H for the jaw sound. And then I might write S-H-O-O, shoe, right, instead of S-H-O-E. In other words, I might change the phonetic spellings, right? Sorry.
Why?
I don't know, because I feel like I should be able to follow these questions better,
Okay.
but
No.
I can't. And the same thing was true of these texts. So when they tried to write something out phonetically, they didn't use the same. They didn't use the same. This isn't going to work, I don't think.
No.
No,
I
sorry.
No.
I'm going to lose my train of thought is the problem. And you're not able to bring me back to it, I don't think. Maybe.
Do you want me to just email you the questions as they come in?
Sure.
Okay.
That'll work. Or text them. I got my phone. God, I suck at this.
You don't suck at this. You have one working eye.
Well, yeah, it's okay. That's true. It's a fair call. Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna stop talking about this because I don't know what the hell I was talking about. Oh, okay. Yes. So one of the things that was in that writing system, in the way that they were representing the Sumerian words, and then I promise I will stop talking about this because I feel like I've gone way off topic here, is they were using, to write Sumerian, they were using a sign that represented, that it had the letter, what we would say is the letter Q, and a kof sound, which you don't use in Sumerian. It's not a word, it's not a letter that's used in Sumerian. It's only used in Akkadian, right? So what I theorize, and you can read about it in my dissertation, it's up on the website, is that these scribes who knew Sumerian needed people to be able to participate in the ritual in which that text was going to be either spoken aloud or instruments were going to be played along to it. And they wanted people that didn't speak Sumerian to be able to either follow along or to be able to pronounce words out loud. They wanted them to be able to read the Sumerian, right? Even if they only read it phonetically and didn't understand what it was that they were saying. And so they, in a sense, transliterated it into characters that they could understand. Into characters is the wrong word, but into using Akkadian signs that they would understand, that they'd be able to pronounce out loud. So, which is why the Q would slip in there. Okay. I have no idea if I answered that question. I probably need to finish my cup of coffee. I'm really sorry, everybody. I feel like I'm not terribly good at this. Oh, Megan's texting me the questions. So, good God. Sorry. Whew. There are 14 that I've missed. And more keep coming. Okay. Tim Smith, what do you and Megan like to do besides Near Eastern studies? Nothing. We don't want to do anything. What do we like to do? She was out there knitting. She taught me to knit, which was nice. I knitted blankets for the girls and one for Oliver. I used to cross stitch a lot, if that means anything to anybody. I try to work out, although it's getting harder to do that. It's getting harder to do that, but you gotta go out there and do it so if you don't work out for a period of time and you have MS, it makes it really hard to anyway. But so I like working out. Just can't do much with it anymore. Megan really likes a comedian named Russell Howard. Anybody knows who that is? I like Brian Regan. Trying to think of other things that I really like Seinfeld and The Office. Yeah. We watched a couple episodes of Big Mouth last night. Anybody seen that? That's a crazy ass show. So there's that. Okay, good God. Sorry, I'm going to go faster. Milwaukee Atheist. If I'm not mistaken, Isaiah 53 has two very different versions. One in the Septuagint, one in the MT. Am I thinking of the right chapter? Very different. That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't worked through the Septuagint recently. There's is it verse 8 or 9 or something where it says he will see. In the MT it says he will see, but in I think in the Septuagint it has the word light, but it's also in 1Q Isaiah A and some of the other manuscripts from Qumran. I don't know. Jeremiah has some passages that are extraordinarily different. And in fact, the whole organization of the book of Jeremiah is different in the Septuagint. So it's probably based on a different forlaga, a different manuscript than what the MT has. So I don't know. I'll take a look and see how different it is. I was just working through the Hebrew this morning. So Milwaukee Atheists, Hezekiah. Okay, Francis Bilotti. Oh no, is that the one that I think that's the one I just answered? Okay, J.R. Pun. Black Hebrewism is the theory that the Jews were black and the modern descendants are black diasporans who were formerly slaves in the New World. Why? Sorry. Okay, that sounds strange. I guess I'd have to evaluate the evidence that they give to suggest that they're using to suggest that. Sorry, that's unsatisfying to anyone's standards. That sounds strange to me. Yeah, that sounds strange. Okay, Christian. Oh, sorry. There's more. Christian identity is the theory that the British and Celtic people are the true Hebrews. I have nothing to add. I don't. That sounds so strange to me, and I'd love to see what evidence they have to support that. Maybe I shouldn't say that because then somebody might show it to me and I have to wade through it. Anyway. Maya Atkinson, did the concept of the firmament come from the Enuma Elish, Tiamat, or does that concept predate that? Can you speak on the concept of it from the ancient mindset? Sure. The dating of the firmament concept. No, it's certainly so Enuma Elish should be late second millennium, probably at the latest early first millennium. Thinking back through the creation stories, I suspect if we were to try to, so there's this idea that there's a bond between heaven and earth, right? The Doron key in Sumerian, and yeah, I mean, I suspect we could look at Molopin, for example, the one of those ancient astronomical texts, and its predecessors, it's stuff that came back from the old Babylonian period. So let me, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, what we're talking about here, the firmament, if you read through Genesis 1:1, it says essentially there was a watery mass. I'm going to try to explain the text rather than quote it now, but there's basically a watery mass, a primordial watery mass, which is something it's not unique to, it's not even the first, obviously, in Genesis 1 to appear there. But this is one of the ancient Near Eastern motifs of creation. And essentially there's this hammered out, flattened, thin-ish thing that gets essentially slid in between it. It's implied that it's slid in between it, but that it pulls up and divides water from water, right? So it divides some of the water and puts some of the water up here. This thing, this hammered out thing, the rakia, the hammered out thing or the flattened thing, or however we want to define it. It's a bronzish thing. If you read through other passages in the Old Testament that have the word that describe it, is the firmament, right? It's this dome. It's another good word for it. There's a dome up above the earth. So you have the earth, it's flat. It's got pillars that are holding it up. And then you've got this dome that goes over top of it. And of course, the stars move through it. Okay. In the ancient Near East, this is it's a very common picture, right? This was the general conception. You have the sky essentially divided into three sections, is divided in thirds. You have the path of Anu, going from east to west. So the movement of the stars. I'm not an astronomer, but the movement of the stars going east to west. In the middle, you have the middle third is the path of Anu. The southern third is the path of Ea, and the northern is the path of Enlil, and the stars move through it. And they talk about astronomical sightings or eclipses or comets. I think there's reference to a comet moving, from one part of the sky, one path, the path of Anu, for example, into the path of Ea, let's say. But that's how they viewed the sky. There are these paths that the stars move across, right? But that firmament, there's a really good book. Actually, there's a really good book on this. It was recently updated. I would highly recommend it. Mesopotamian Cosmic Geography by Wayne Hurwitz. And actually, hold on. Let me just find, because I know that he discusses this in here. Let me find the section on the firmament, because this is interesting. You should spend a minute on this. Okay. Right. Is this where he talks about it? Sorry. This is good. I'm reading to myself live. It did say 262. Okay, okay. The composition of the heavens. I'll just read some of it. There are two traditions concerning the composition of the heavens, and this is ancient Near Eastern tradition, right? So, ancient Near Eastern Mesopotamian tradition. According to the one tradition, the heavens are made of water. In the second, the heavens are made of stone. And the stone is actually the one that I think we're more concerned with here, but we can. Water. Explicit statements that the heavens are made of water are found in Babylonian texts. Examples include in Elish 4, where Marduk builds the heavens out of the part of the watery corpse of Tiamat. These traditions may be compared with Genesis 1, where the primeval waters are divided in two, with the upper waters positioned above the firmament, Rakia. Psalm 104 and 148 speak of the waters above the heavens. And of course, this is where the rain comes from, right? Or at least the massive rain or massive water, like in the flood, can come from there. The phenomenon of rainfall is explained in Mesopotamia in different ways. In the Lamashtu incantation, dew is connected in some way with the stars. In Sumerian text, rain issues from the cosmic teats called the Ubor Ana, the teats of heaven, which serve as rain ducts in the sky. But again, it's this solid thing that's up there. And again, I'm going to be on the Non Sequitur show talking about this, and I'll move on. But the Earth really is depicted as flat in the Bible. There really is. It's depicted as having pillars and a dome over it. I mean, and the reason that that's not surprising and it's not a problem is this is just how the ancient world was pictured. So this idea that the Old Testament doesn't depict the Earth as flat is silly, I think. So we'll talk about that on the Non Sequitur show. So stay tuned for that. Actually, that's one of my little side projects I'm working on. Okay. Lee McGee, firmament or rakia are conduits. Okay, that was a response. They are made part of a wheeled sakia that's separated upper and lower waters. Okay. Milwaukee Atheist says, excuse me, my name is actually Yeshua. It's Yesu, please, if we're going to stick with the Greek. or Yehoshua, if we want to be very proper. I'm just teasing. Okay. Yeah, I don't. Okay. Francis Bellotti. Did Akkadian scribes intentionally? Whenever a text comes through, it shoots all the text down. Did Akkadian scribes intentionally keep the writing system complicated so that novices could not teach themselves to write and thereby steal the work and livelihood of the scribal class? No, no, I don't think so. I don't see any evidence for that. What I would say is that there are times that Sumerian scribes show off, at least in the text that I work with. So actually, as part of my dissertation, I have a small section on this. So remember how I was talking about how the Sumerian words, they write them out phonetically. So they spell them very oddly. They spell them as they sound, not as they're actually spelled. And what you would expect in that context is that they're using easier to read signs or more familiar signs to write out phonetically the more complicated signs, right? To make it easier to read. But we have some counterexamples where signs that are actually very easy, and that everybody would have understood them if you read Akkadian, you'd be able to understand it, that they're replaced in very easy to understand places with complicated phonetic, like homophonous signs. An example, the word, the way you say your, Y-O-U-R, something, possessive. If you wanted to say your king, the word king is lugal. If you wanted to say your king, you'd say lugal zu. You'd put a zu after it, your king, second singular. And zu is an easy sign to write. Everybody knows it. It's used in Akkadian and Sumerian all over the place. In my text, you have lugal, or not lugal, but you have zu2, which is the ka sign, which is, you don't have to know. It'd be very strange to see it there, right? And so my argument, and you see this in some of the literary texts, and I think I demonstrate it to a reasonable level of certainty, that these are scribal students that are in training that are showing off their knowledge of the cuneiform system, right? So they're, signs like the ka sign can have 7 different values. Inim, du 11, zu 2, ka. It can have all kinds of different values depending on the context. And what they're doing is, I think they're showing off and saying, look, I can, instead of writing zu 1, which is just the simple zu sign that everybody knows, I'm going to write zu 2 to show that I know the ka sign represents that, and I'm kind of playing around with it and showing off a little bit. So no, I don't think that they kept it complicated to keep people down. I think that it just was complicated. We see in the Old Assyrian period, for example, that you could make the cuneiform system easier to use. You just restrict the sign values, or you restrict the number of signs that you use down to 80, maybe might even been that many in the Old Assyrian period. The people that worked in the tin and textiles trade. Anyway, good question. Okay. So Lee McGee, Isaiah is a lamentation. The fall of Tyre. That's not a question. Okay. Do you have any reading recommendations for bull worship in the ancient Near East and the rest of the Mediterranean? I'm working on a video on a golden calf narrative. That's an interesting question. Email me. I don't want to go looking now, but I'm sure that I could find you something. Trying to think of something. I wonder if there'd be anything in Richard Hess's book on Israelite religion. Shoot me an email. I should be able to find something. Okay. I found an article by Ori Gabai that I linked in the chat. Don't know if anything else off the top of my head. Is that part of the same comment? Is a separate text. Ori Gabai actually has written on MSL text, which is Sorry, she answered my question. I didn't hear because I'm special.
Sorry, the Ori goodbye was a comment from me to you saying I found something Ori goodbye wrote, but I don't know if there's anything else.
On the bull?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Also, Erin had her baby.
Ah, awesome. My sister-in-law had her baby. She was, I think, 87 weeks pregnant. No, I think she was probably 41. It felt like 87 to her, I'm sure, but she had the baby. What? Was it a boy or a girl? I have to wait 8 seconds for the stream to catch up. That's awesome. I doubt Aaron's watching, but congratulations. That's fantastic. Okay, I'm currently trying to read up on the Galu Gala. Like the Gala Priest, or are you talking about the Gala Demons? You're probably talking about the Gala Demons. Yeah, okay, yes, the Rare Lexicon de Sociologie is probably good. Might be a little dated, the G volume. Send me an email. Say that a lot, sorry. Send me an email and I will, she had a little boy. Sorry, she had a little boy. That's awesome. Yeah, so, I mean, you see them in Anonymous Descent, obviously, a lot of these texts that deal with Tamuzi. The Gala Demons come, Tamuzi and Geshtinana. And so, yeah, they're, but send me an email and I can probably find you something more specific. There's probably something really easy and light in Black and Green's book on, I never remember what it's called, but demons, something, gods and demons. But I say that it's simple, but it's reliable. You know, Jeremy Black, excellent scholar, was an excellent scholar. Okay. Ezekiel, the probable author of Genesis. Okay, that's okay. Didra Hammurabi. So archaeologist Megan, I think, is just putting both comments and questions. It sucks when you can't think of a word right in my text. So archaeologists publish papers even when they're not working in academia. I'm referring to Josh's paper that he teased this weekend. Is this common? Good question. So let's not, I wouldn't want you to compare. Yes, they do. I wouldn't want you to compare the paper that I wrote to something that I would submit for publication. This is sort of written for submit for peer-reviewed publication. That doesn't mean that it's not, I think it's fairly rigorous. But it's written on something that you wouldn't expect people to, like. I sent it to Dr. Reed, actually. I sent it to him, so I just, hey, look through this, what do you think? And he wrote back and said, do people actually debate this? But yes, there are tons of scholars that it's difficult to find work in academia, right? So while they might not have a professorship, Megan's going to be one of these people specifically. Sorry, that's another text coming through on my phone or on my watch. Man, we have 48 people watching. You guys are amazing. I have 19 likes. I think that's good. If you haven't hit the like button and you feel like it's a good stream, please do so. And if you haven't subscribed, that would be amazing too. We're working our way up. We had this huge spike. Like, I don't know, when we went from 1,000 to 2,000, it went like 14 days. And it's sort of backed off now. I don't know what happened, but anyway, it's still good. We're still moving up. I think we're at 20, close to 2,350 maybe. Anyhow, God, I shouldn't talk about other things while I'm in the middle of something. Yes, sorry. So they do publish. And actually I have a lot of friends that do that. Excellent scholarship can come out even if you're not. And part of the reason is if you stay serious about it, the reason that so many people that publish are also professors is that when you're teaching, right, it's almost required that you stay active in the field, right? Because I mean, it is required, I think, if you're going to do a good job. because you have to stay current because you're teaching these classes, right? When you're not in a professorship or a specific research program where you're having to churn out material, the onus is just on you to stay current, right? So, but that, I mean, if you stay current, you stay active, you can ostensibly or theoretically have more free time to do research than people that are in teaching positions. So, okay, what ethnicity were the Sumerians? The $64,000 question. I mean, are they genetically related to any groups of people extant today? So, okay, good question. We don't know, and honestly, it's one reputable theory is that you initially had, and I think there are probably a fair amount of scholars that would say this, that initially you had distinct ethnic groups. The Sumerians were there in Mesopotamia, and Akkadians came in very quickly. Though there was an intermingling between these two ethnic groups that made them maybe not indistinguishable, but certainly trying to parse out, who is who would be, I think, an impossibility. And I think Michalowski wrote on this, actually. So if you email me about it, I can probably find that. I'm going to get a whole bunch of emails with questions. That's good. That's good. Okay. Biblical history skeptics. Do you know of any scholarly books or grammars on the Edomite language? I don't. I don't. You could probably check Hunegard, or I can check Hunegard. It's down there somewhere. He probably listed out in his bibliography. Shoot me an email. Ginger Core 69. I'm very impressed in how the temples worked in Sumerian times. Any advice on what books or sources I should check about temples? Yeah, Charpin did a book. It's in French recently on temples. Actually, I've got it somewhere here. It might be out in the other room. But I suspect that the bibliography there would point you in a really good direction. I would also say that an easy place to go is the RLA, Rare Lexicon d'Archéologie, entry on temples. I suspect that there's something there that's substantial. And Megan has linked something. And yeah, this is sort of Megan's area, which is great. Sorry, now I'm waiting for questions. This is good. Oh man, we jumped up 6 more likes. You guys are fantastic. While I'm waiting for questions, let me say that so I ran out on my phone. So let me say that I wanted to talk a little bit about there's some topics that come up, particularly on Skylar Show a lot, that I just a cursory review of different apologetics YouTube sites, YouTube channels will tell you that these are hot topics, that people want, and you guys all know this, but tell me these are hot topics that are for some reason debated, and I don't know why. I do know why. But I mean from a linguistic or cultural perspective, I don't know why. So slavery is one of them, right? I find it interesting that passages like Leviticus 25, that comes, that passage that comes up so often on Scholar's channel, that there's such pushback about, or maybe what is considered on their part justifiable pushback on what that actually means. And what I notice is that oftentimes the text itself is not dealt with, but there's another verse that's appealed to sort of soften maybe or add a caveat to what that verse actually says. Now, of course, from my perspective, even if I were to grant you that the passage that you go to try to soften that text has a meaning that might soften it, the Pentateuch, of course, of the Torah is not this homogenous text that was written by one person. So, one of the things that we know about the Pentateuch is that you have contradictory things that show up in it. So, but the other thing I guess that is funny is that passages that talk about where you is it Deuteronomy 20, Deuteronomy 21 talks about beating a slave, and while I wouldn't say that it's the most straightforward verse, there are certain things that are clear from it. One, that slave is your property, right? It's your kesef. It's your money. It's your thing that you purchase things with. Sorry, I'm just giving definitions of kesef there. I got another question about Ugaritic. I'll talk about that in just a second. I find it interesting that those verses are sort of gleaned over. So I want to say to you, my listening audience of 45 people, slaves were property. If you were considered an eved in that context, right, in the context of being a foreign slave purchased by an Israelite, you were property, right? I mean, like, you could be handed down. The owner could beat you, right? Appealing to a text that says if you put out an eye or put out a tooth, a couple of verses later, that somehow, and that's what I see. That's what I see all the time. Is that the Old Testament law, the Pentateuchal law, was so revolutionary in its time, which I would take some issue with, at least. Sorry, I saw something in red and I tried to read it. But appealing to things like that, or to things like, look at this other verse and it's opposite. It really is a little disingenuous. And I understand why it's done, right? Because dealing with Leviticus 25, 44 to 46 would be, if you had to stick to those verses, it would be tough. If you had to stick to, again, the Deuteronomy 20 to 21, something like that, where it talks beating a slave, and if he's able to get up, either if he's able to get up after 2 days, or if he survives 2 days, whether that means, and I have an interpretation of that text. I think the Hebrew is saying a certain thing, but I could definitely be wrong about it. It either means, at least two good options would be, let's just pull it up. How about that? I've got a Bible here. So 21. There you go. 21, 20 to 21. Whew. And if a man beats his male and female servant with a rod, so that he dies under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he remains alive a day or two, and that's the phrase that's difficult, right? He shall not be punished, for he is his property. That part is not difficult. That part's not complicated, right? I mean, that's what it means. The part that says, and I had a discussion about this with somebody in the comments a month ago, maybe. And again, I have a position on this that I think I feel is good, but there are other commentators that take the other position, which is absolutely fine, and it's just as good of a position to take, I think, and that is that when it says if he can get up after a day or two, that what the text is saying there is if he survives a day or two. Let me say what I think it's saying. Sorry, Oliver's crying, and it's throwing me off. Okay, so when it says if he survives a day or two, the way I'm reading that in the context is that if he survives and is able to get back up within a day or two and take on normal responsibilities, he doesn't die, right? He may suffer, but he suffers for 2 days and then he can get up and he's good to go. That passage could be read, and of course, the way that I would understand that is that the loss that the person suffers, which is part of the context here, the loss that the person suffers, the owner suffers, is he lost 2 days of work that slave could have provided him. That was his penalty, right? But he's his property, and so it's like it's like bending your shovel or something. I mean, it sounds really crass. You're only hurting yourself if you go and break your lawnmower, right? Okay. But that phrase could mean that if he survives a day or two and then dies, as long as he survives that day or two, even if he dies at the end of that, the owner is good. I mean, I think either interpretation is plausible. But neither of those are really good for someone that's trying to argue that slaves weren't property. Okay. Ugaritic. That's what I was supposed to. Oh boy, we got more questions. Okay. Could you talk about Ugaritic, specifically about the sounds and syllables that they used for the signs, or was? Okay. So Ugaritic is alphabetic. Ugaritic it uses cuneiform signs, right? But it's an alphabetic script. So there aren't syllables. It's not the same type of cuneiform. So cuneiform in Akkadian and Sumerian was either syllabic or it was logographic or any of these other things. But like Hebrew and Ugaritic, same sort of process. The aleph sign is just an aleph, right? So in Ugaritic, the Ugaritic sign, even though it's cuneiform, just represents that letter, right? So in that sense, and I'm not a Ugaritic expert, right? I took Ugaritic with Professor Ted Lewis, and he was very gracious, I think, in his grading of me. I had a lot of other stuff going on. I had a lot of Sumerian to do at that time. So it got less attention than I would have liked. Caleb, if he's watching, put in a lot of time, which was great. But I couldn't. Dr. Reed, actually, tremendous amount of work in that class. If you want to talk to somebody about Ugaritic, Dr. Reed would be good to talk about. I mean, he doesn't specialize in Ugaritic, but certainly knows it very well. If he's watching, I'm really sorry if that wasn't something I was supposed to say, because now he's going to get inundated with Ugaritic questions. Just kidding. I doubt that would happen. Okay. Would you think Enkidu is an older version of Adam, such as he came from clay and was breathed into life? No, I mean, people coming from clay is sort of the typical thing. There's Sumerian literary texts that talk about that outdate, by 1,000 years or something. At least the Epic of Gilgamesh. So, no, I mean, people coming from clay, humans coming from clay or from dirt or from the earth. That's not uncommon. Certainly not unique to the biblical text. Zanos Carthage. Who's my favorite superhero? Huh. That's a better question for Megan, unless you're specifically wanting to know, because she's much more into superheroes. I would say, though, that I mean, I've got a soft spot for Superman, right? But that's I'm picturing Christopher Reeve. So Actually, well, I think I said this actually on a stream. Um, yeah, I got a soft spot for Superman, the old Superman. The newer ones I don't care for too terribly much. I like Iron Man as a character. I mean, as a I don't know if he'd be considered a superhero though, because he doesn't have any superpowers. You need to have superpowers, right, to be a superhero. Um, I like Thor, for different reasons. Um, Sometimes I like the Incredible Hulk. I'm thinking of like the more recent movies here, where he takes Loki and smashes him back and forth, and then walks away saying "puny God," which is just an amazing moment. Okay, what do I think of Richard Carrier? Good question. Actually, reading through his book now, which is uh, this guy on the historicity of Jesus. Richard Carrier, PhD, um, um, Columbia, PhD from Columbia, I think, in ancient history. I mean, yeah, I think you have to take Richard Carrier seriously. Um, Seems like a really nice guy. I've never talked to him, but I mean, I think you have to take his scholarship very seriously. And I think I think that he would even say that I don't think that he would take a hardline stance that there's no possibility that a historical Jesus existed. I could be wrong about that, but I mean, I feel like I've heard him say that. But he's not. I wouldn't in any way consider Richard Carey like a kook or something. Um, but it's probably a question better left until I finish the book. But yeah, I watched the debate between Paula Gia and Mike Winger on the Non Sequitur show a couple nights ago, and I really think that Paula Gia did a fantastic job. I really do, and it's a tough thing to debate. And but this topic now has sort of come into it's come onto my radar, and it's a good thing. It's good for me to begin to wade back into New Testament textual material. So yeah, stay tuned. I guess I'll probably have more of an opinion on that as time goes by. Okay, how does Akkadian resemble other Semitic languages grammatically? Is it similar, or does it seem to be more anonymous from its cousin languages? No, I mean that's a good question. It's Semitic language. So grammatically, syntactically, a lot of commonalities. Lexically, it's based on trilateral root system. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of similarities between Akkadian and Sumerian. So, Akkadian and Sumerian, Akkadian and Hebrew. You can see where my mind goes, right? As an Assyriologist. No, so I mean, very, very similar. Okay. Oh, Bobby. Hey, Bobby. Oh wait, I skipped one. Sorry. Have you read Bart Ehrman's "Did Jesus Exist"? I have not. I have not. I did just buy his book. I don't remember what it's called. It's on the way. But no, I haven't. I'll put it on the list. I understand Bart Ehrman and Richard Carrier maybe in this regard don't play well together, but anyway. Okay. So Bobby asks, use Bayesian inference to argue that there's a 1/3 chance that there was a literal historical Jesus. I remember us talking about this, didn't we, Bobby? I think we talked about this. Bobby, Megan, and I had a really great conversation. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you're a really smart guy. I really enjoyed that conversation. We should do it again. John Kobu, Richard Carrier said 2/3 odds that Jesus did not exist. Oh, okay, it's the same thing that we're talking about here. Okay. Right. What else was I going to talk about? As I'm waiting for more questions to come in. So please, if you have questions, shoot them at me. I don't know if this is this beneficial to anybody? We've been going for an hour. I don't know if I'm pouring everybody to tears, but See, the thing is, everybody's probably thinking, why can't we just bring Megan in here? And Megan's a lot prettier to look at. I agree wholeheartedly. Right. If you, we have, God, man, 32 likes, 40 people watching. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. If you haven't liked and you feel like that'd be cool to do, I'd appreciate it. Like and a subscribe or tweet it out or whatever people do. Okay, so we talked about slavery, and again, I really feel like it's tough to argue with those specific passages, right? Oh, that's something else talked about. So Numbers 5. Numbers 5 is the text starting in verse, I think 11. It talks about a woman that is suspected of having committed adultery, and but there's no one to witness it. And there's this, this water ritual that is conducted with the priest at the tabernacle. And I'll just summarize it sort of briefly here. The text says that if a woman lies with a man and there's a seminal emission, right? There's an ejaculation, and but it's hidden. Let's see how good I am at this. It's hidden from her husband's eyes, and he gets kina. He gets jealous, is the way they're translating that. Of course, it's not completely straightforward what that means. But at any rate, he suspects, but he doesn't have any evidence. That's the key, right? What do you do? What do you do? So that he's to bring an offering and come to the tabernacle, give it to the priest. The priest gets us some water. There's a whole ritual involved in this. The text goes into some detail about it. And then he scoops up some dust from the floor of the tabernacle, which may have contained excrement, blood, who knows. Puts it into the water, and the woman swears that she has, not been unfaithful, and she drinks it. And the idea here is this is similar to, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar to the river ordeal that was something that was done in Mesopotamia, where someone would go into the river, be thrown in, whatever, jump in, and then if they were, the river was the god, right, and the god would deal with the person because the god knew that God would deal with the person, and of course there were all kinds of things involved with that we won't go into. But the point is that the god is the one that's dealing with the guilty party or the innocent party. So the idea would be if the woman is innocent of this, right? She hasn't committed adultery, that everything will be fine. She'll be able to go on and bear children. But if not, the text uses some. It's not easy, right? Anybody tells you that it's easy is just hasn't read the secondary literature on this, hasn't read the Hebrew. It's the thigh. I'm trying to remember the Hebrew word. The thigh, like it. Let's just read it. It rots, I think is how they translate the word. It's been a week or so since I read it. Okay, Numbers 5. Guess I could have just read it. Would have been easier. Okay. Makes your thigh rot and your belly swell. The Hebrew there is complex. Complex is not. It's just. It doesn't appear a lot. That the verb nafal does, obviously, but in this context, it's strange. It's difficult to know. So some people believe that it's the internal organs that are physically dropping down inside of the woman. But the debate here, I guess, is whether a fetus would be aborted here. And I think that while it's very difficult to come to a firm conclusion on this, I was looking at this for Shannon Q. It's the reason I was dealing with the passage myself. I think there are certain things that are clear. Number one, it's clear that seminal emission is involved, right? You have a seminal emission. You can see that early on. I think it's actually in verse 11. So you have to deal with that in the passage, right? If you've got a seminal emission, if you read through the Levitical passages on keeping pure and being unclean, and if a man and a woman lie together and there's a seminal emission, they're both unclean, and they have to go through a certain ritual to become clean, and so on. Or they have to wash in a certain way, and then they're unclean, I think, till evening. And anyway, so I think you have to deal with the fact that in the circumstance, it's assumed that there's a seminal emission. If she's guilty, that someone has ejaculated, right? The man has ejaculated. And that being said, I think it's perfectly within the realm of it's perfectly appropriate to assume that if we're to step into this worldview and say that this was a process that actually took place, is a ritual that actually took place, and it was actually done in this way under these circumstances, that you'd have aborted fetuses. I mean, you just would. I don't think that's in any way unsafe to say. Yeah, I just thought that would be interesting because I dealt with that recently, and we now have more questions. Okay. Richard Carrier went on an ad hominem and insult spree on Bart Ehrman's book. Basically spent his whole review of the book insulting Bart's scholarship and credibility as a scholar. Yeah. That doesn't sound nice. Yeah. That's no good. Do you have any advice for memorizing all the meanings for the sign inventory? How did you do it yourself? That's a good question. Okay, my first bit of advice would be take my Sumerian class. Just kidding. Shameless plug there. No, but really, it's difficult. So there are certain things that you'll see. You'll see that, if you flip open Borger's 2010 sign list and you see all the different possibilities that any sign could have, you'll freeze and never want to study Akkadian or Sumerian again, right? Because even if you look at Katharina Mittermeier's Alta Babylonische Zeichenliste, even if you look at that, which has, it's just looking at the Old Babylonian literary texts, the signs that are used there, you'll still freeze in horror because it's like, oh my gosh, how can you memorize so many of these things? I mean, it's 700 signs possibly. Not there in particular, but you will find though that there are certain signs that use certain values, and those are the ones that they use them all the time, right? Just like in biblical Hebrew, if you've ever studied biblical Hebrew or Greek, it's a lot different translating through, let's say, John than it is to translate through the book of Hebrews, right? In the book of Hebrews, you have hapax legomena, words that are used just one time, like several times per chapter, right? I mean, it's Hebrews is a lot more difficult to translate. And so if you're reading through the Old Testament, you're trying to translate through something like Lamentations, or some of these other poetic passages. Isaiah 53 is another good one. Maybe not as much, but there are passages that have words that are just used infrequently, right? The same. So if you were to try to memorize all of the Hebrew words, you'd drive yourself crazy, right? At least at first, you drive yourself crazy because there's just so many of them. But there's this core group of vocabulary words that if you remember them, you can really translate a lot of text and then know where to look to find the other ones. And the same sort of thing is true here. So if you're studying Akkadian, you're studying Sumerian, what I would recommend seriously is to use my video series. Sorry, I just turned Siri on. Use the video series that we have up on Digital Hammurabi, and 7 chapters into my grammar. I've got 4 chapters left to write. Hopefully by the end of the year, that'll be written. Then we got to figure out how to publish it, but like how we're going to self-publish it. But at any rate, what I would do is, learn the basic signs that I give you, because I'm going to give you ones that are, I think, relatively common for the text you're going to be translating. And then start reading through those texts. And as you read through them, make flashcards of them, be they electronic or physical. This is how I did it. And, just memorize that basic core set of signs, the basic core vocabulary. And as you start to read through text, you're going to get through a line, maybe 2, and then you're going to come up on stuff that you're like, I don't know what this is. And you're going to have to go look it up. Don't try to commit that to memory. Just kind of, it'll be logged away in part of your brain somewhere, that you'll have one interaction with it. So the next time you interact with that sign, it'll be, it'll make it even more familiar, and you'll just continue to encounter these signs. Now, if you end up going to university to study, or if you go get a PhD in this stuff, first of all, that'll be a tremendous foundation upon which to build. I didn't have that foundation at all when I started my PhD program. But you'll have to read so much that familiarity will come very, very quickly. So that's what I would recommend. Get a core amount of signs, and you can get at least the Sumerian ones right now from me. If you want to learn Akkadian, I'll probably end up teaching an Akkadian course as well, a video series. But I'll follow John Hunegard's book, which is an excellent resource. And he, if you follow his vocabulary, follow his sign list, the same sort of thing will happen there. Was the Tower of Babel inspired by a specific partially built ziggurat? I think that I'm going to blank on the name on which one it is now. The Atimandaguru, maybe. I think that it's theorized that it was based on that. I could look back probably at shoot me an email and I can get you that. I don't know that they know. I don't know that we know that it was specifically based on it. I think the idea is that when the text was written during, the 5th century or around there, that the tall ziggurat that would have been standing would have been the impetus for that. But I don't know that we know that. But email me. Let me take a look before I commit to that. Have you seen the Rising Star Expedition by Professor Lee Berger about Homo naledi giving archaeology more exposure, including virtual reality? I have not. I don't know that I know what that is. So no, I have not seen that. But you guys can always send us links to things if you think that it's something that we should either take a look at or maybe interact with. I'm not saying that I will always be able to do that, because I do have a full-time job, but when we can, we like to be able to do that stuff for you guys. I've run out of questions. How we doing? We've been going now for an hour and 15 minutes. I can keep talking. I can keep thinking. We can talk about prophecy, maybe. That's something else that I've seen come up. We could talk about, what else have I dealt with recently? Sorry, I think I may have gotten another. Let's see. Sorry, Megan's texted me something here. Megan, why don't you just come in here, because I'm not sure I know what you're saying. Tim Smith says, what do you think of the book of Ecclesiastes? It's a late book. It was purported. It seems that they're making the suggestion that Solomon would have been the one to write it. But I mean, it's like it's a late text. I mean, Solomon didn't write it, in my opinion. A lot of connections to Gilgamesh. I know it's been 8 seconds, so I don't hear Megan coming back. Maybe she's dealing with Oliver. But sorry, I'm supposed to read through I guess I'm supposed to read through the comments section. Sorry, I feel like this is gonna not go well if I something about the ziggurats. What are you guys talking about ziggurats here? Oh, wait, I hear Megan coming to the rescue. To the rescue.
Don't worry about it.
Oh.
It's not.
Oh. Well, go ahead. I mean, it's fine.
No, I don't know enough to review them.
Oh, well, I might. That's okay. Yeah. All right. Anyway. Sorry. Megan's being diplomatic, which is good. That's good. We like being diplomatic. Oh, she said Oliver is unraveling all of my wool, which is probably why. She didn't come back. What advice do you have for an aspiring Assyriologist? Yeah, that's a great question. I say that a lot, don't I? You guys ask good questions. Well, it depends. I mean, if you're in a program, fantastic. Obviously just work really, really hard. If you're not in a program yet, if you're not in a PhD program yet, talk to a Assyriologist in the field. I think that's probably the first thing to do to find a good school. I'm obviously partial to Johns Hopkins because there are amazing professors there. Paul Del Nero teaches Sumerian, and Jake Lowinger teaches Akkadian. Of course, Paul Del Nero teaches Akkadian as well. But, and they're just brilliant men. And of course, there's a phenomenal ancient Near Eastern just department as a whole. And it's but anyhow, that's what and that's what you want to do. You want to talk to a Assyriologist. What's a good school to go to? What's not a good school to? Who are and if you ask, on the side, if you ask privately, people in the know will tell you, hey, this guy might be a brilliant scholar, but he might not be the best to be taught by, because see, those two things, as you may know, don't always go together. Brilliance and the ability to teach and transmit information. Of course, that happens at Johns Hopkins. You see, everybody's brilliant and everybody can relay information well. So another shameless plug for my school. But that would be the first thing that I would do if you're way off, like if you've got years before if you're in your bachelor's degree or something and you want to go out and you've got some years, start studying Akkadian. I would learn Akkadian before I learned Sumerian. I know that sounds crazy to say, but if you're, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, if you want to focus in on, there aren't as many people that want to focus in Assyriology on the Sumerian texts. And because there's such crossover and such interaction between the Akkadian text and the biblical text, people often will work in first millennium Akkadian, near Assyrian, near Babylonian. But I mean, if you're really interested in Sumerian, start watching my video series. I mean, really, I think that's a fantastic way to kind of get your feet wet and to see if you'd like it. But yeah, I think Assyriology is great because I don't know. I'm noticing that there aren't a lot of. This sounds weird. There aren't a lot of me's on YouTube, and I don't mean like there are a lot of brilliant people on YouTube, but there aren't a lot of Assyriologists here that I found. So maybe I'm just not looking, but is the word Ecclesiastes Greek or Hebrew? Well, the Hebrew word is kohelet, which is like the preacher. So the Hebrew book is called Kohelet. but it's an amazing book. I remember my when one of my first weeks in the Kohelet class that I took at Hopkins, the professor came in and she sat back. She leaned way back in her chair. She said, "What is Tov? What is Tov?" It was really great. Tov means good, and it's used a lot in the book. So anyway. Okay. Well, Megan, if there aren't any other questions, she's reminded me that we do have a 2-hour stream tonight, which is fantastic. I feel like I owed you guys this, and it seems, like you guys are enjoying it enough. There are 42 people here. And I don't know. I really appreciate all of you. So I am going to go, I guess, unless there are any last minute questions that people want. Oh, see some red. Oh, okay. So, looks like there's one more question. So I will wait. I will wait for the one more question. Do you think knowing Sumerian and Akkadian will help me get into the program at program? Oh, I want the program I want. Yeah, I mean, I think that's. Sorry, I'm reading Anunnaki the One's comment. I don't know what he's referring to. Maybe there's something going on that I don't know about in the side chat. Yeah, I mean, I think yes, no question about it. So I remember people coming in to the program that had exposure to Sumerian and Akkadian before, and it's always a good thing, right? When you're applying to these programs, you submit writing samples, and when you do that, if you're writing about the ancient Near East, if you're writing about an Akkadian text or a Sumerian text, and you're making good arguments for what you know from the, or at least good observations from the original languages, that always looks good. I mean, in my experience. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously grades are really important. But I found that because doctoral programs are so rigorous, they're so difficult, and they take so long, relatively speaking, that it might be easier. That sounds bad. It might be easier than you might think to get into the program, and harder than you think to stay in the program. And not because they kick you out or something, but because it's just so difficult. You really have to be committed. That's the key. You have to be committed. You have to be committed to getting up every morning and doing the same thing. Not the same thing, but studying really, really hard, working really, really hard. It really is an endurance thing. So if you have that endurance and you're interested in the topic, I think it's a great idea. So, okay, Megan, if we don't have, I have 5 texts. Let's see. Sorry. Suck Dixter 133. I just think that's such a funny name. When did the first Mesopotamian Indus Valley trade occur? Did it occur in the ancient past? Yes, no doubt. I think that we have evidence from the 6th millennium, but we definitely have it during the 3rd millennium. There's a book that I've recommended here before by Steinkeller and somebody else. I can't remember the other guy's name. Babylonia and the Indus Valley. I don't know if it's back here, if it's out in the other room, but if you email me, I'll get you the title. But it's about 80, 90 pages, but it's jam-packed with Indus Valley information. Oh, he wants to go to Penn. Yeah. Fantastic school. Actually, get a hold of us. We can talk. Maybe we can put you in contact with some people or float your name or something. I don't know. get in contact with us. If someone were to ask, how would you answer a question like this? How is the study or understanding of Sumerian and other ancient languages and texts helpful to modern living? Yeah, it's a question. If you're gonna do it, you better be able to answer it to yourself anyway. Well, I'm doing it now. I think about something like Christianity. Let's just take Christianity, for example. Christianity, a lot of people don't realize this, the traditions and the rituals and all the things that were born out of the Old Testament text have their roots ultimately in Sumerian and Akkadian and in Mesopotamia, right? I mean, like so much of Western civilization, just in general, is born. Civilization in general is born from from the ancient Near East and from Mesopotamia. So, I mean, understanding where the firsts happened is absolutely critical. At any point, whether you're dealing with a topic like homosexuality or you're dealing with any type of a moral issue, being able to go back and read the original text, dealing with legal issues, being able to go back and see specifically what is it that people did. The interesting thing about Mesopotamia, contrasted particularly with something like other ancient texts, is that we have the originals, right? We have the originals because they're written on clay. So much of it was written on clay. And we have them in so many of them, right? Hundreds of thousands of these texts. And so you can go back and get, a really good idea of what was the economy like? What was trade like? What were the rituals like? How did they worship? What was, Megan's doing a series now on sexuality, right? And sexual metaphor in the ancient Near East and in Mesopotamia. I think all of these things, I deal with it every day. I use it every day. So yeah, I think it's actually very important to understanding if you're going to understand where we are today. I think it's only prudent to understand where it all began. So, are you looking for some great forgotten truth? Is it just to show off? Why does this help mankind over engineering or music? I don't think that these things are at odds with one another, right? I don't think I don't think that anybody's advocating that people should abandon mathematics or engineering or the arts in order to study humanities. What I do see happening, though, and this is just all anecdotal, my own personal experience, is that people will play the humanities down, right? It happens at universities, right? The humanities people don't focus in on trying to articulate why it's so important, like we're doing right here, why it's so important to understand antiquity in the ancient world. And so because of that, people think, well, I should just become an engineer because that's where the money's at, right? And that's something to say. If you're in it to make money, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, go do the thing that makes money. We need people like that in a society for it to function. There's just no question about that. But I think it's also very worthwhile to understand the humanities and to engage with them. And you need people that do that, right? You do. It's important to understand things like ancient musicology. And that seems like, wow, why would you need that? These are all part of what it means to operate in a civilized way, I think, in a society. And this is how society moves forward because we understand where we've come from in all aspects, or at least as many as we can. So, yeah, I certainly wouldn't downplay engineering. It's a really important thing. So, what do you think is a likely date for the Book of Job? 5th century. I'm just sort of trying to remember from the last time I worked on this. But I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak to it right now. If you shoot me an email, I could do a little work on that. But man, I don't know that I'm going to be able to deal with all these emails. But okay, I just saw that the Godless Iowan is starting his 2,000 subscriber celebration. So I don't want to pull from him. Oh, Rado's watching. Hey, Rado. So real quick, and I'll close out with this. This has been a lot of fun. Rado is he's one of my best friends. He's out in Germany, out in Tübingen. And when I got my Fulbright scholarship and went out to Tübingen to work with Professor Conrad Folk, I met Rado in the gym. And I remember the first time I interacted with him, I told him that he was only deadlifting 120 kilos or something, and he was actually deadlifting 160 kilos. And he made sure that I knew that very, very quickly. But he's a fantastic guy, brilliant guy. I don't even remember how many languages he's fluent in. German, Bulgarian. He's Bulgarian, so German, Bulgarian, French, Spanish, English. He speaks English better than many people that I know. So now I just yeah, Rado, I'm really happy that you're watching, man. Anyway, okay. Well, I'm gonna go because I want people to watch the Godless Iowans 2,000 subscriber celebration. And so if you're watching us here, please, if you've got time, go right on over and tell him we sent you so that he knows. I don't know. They just got married, and it's a really fun time for him and Miss Snarky. So we're really happy for him. So, guys, we will be back on at some point tonight. Oh, I can probably look here and see that, can't I? It says 7:30. Bitching about Sitchin. Okay. Yeah. So we'll be back on at 7:30, and we're gonna be telling you about Zachariah Sitchin's 12th Planet and picking that shit apart. So please come back. If you haven't liked the video, please do so. And yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Really help us out. Go check out Godless Iowan stream now. And we'll see you tonight. Until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that? See you guys.